everybody, my name's Ringa and welcome to my colouring quick tips video. It was actually requested that I do a tutorial, but I'm definitely not a professional and this is just a hobby to me, and I don't think I'm the person who should be telling people how to colour because 99% of what I do I make up and I guess, so I'm really not the person you want to come to asking for tutorials. There is, however, a couple of tips and tricks that I've picked up over the years that have really helped me, and some of them aren't like common knowledge, so I thought I would just make a quick video going over some tips that you personally might find useful, or you might think they look terrible and avoid them forever. But, you know, you win some, you lose some. So, first of all, I've done all my base colours here, just drawn some miscellaneous objects, just so I can get this done quickly, instead of like drawing something detailed. um, First of all, I want to talk about clipping groups. Sometimes they're called clipping masks. It depends on what version of Psy you have. And these layers, for those who don't know, are basically hard to explain. But see, I'm going to just scribble all over this. By pressing clipping group, it makes sure I'm only drawing where there is colour on the layer underneath. This is really useful for shading, obviously, because you can go outside the lines and nobody knows and nobody will ever know. Unless you do a silly tutorial and make a mess. So they're really, really useful, and they also allow you to utilize a lot of layer styles, which are here. Layer styles can save your life. I'm not gonna lie. They're amazing. And they're especially good if, like me, you are terrible at picking colours. I hate picking colours, I'm not gonna lie. When I used to pick my own colours for shading, it would just be literally diagonal line, bottom right, like this. And then I would shade with that. And then I would shade with that. And then I would shade with that. And that was it. Boom. The problem with this is it can lead to very one-dimensional colours, like that's just purple. I mean, sometimes I would spin this wheelie thing and add a little bit of blue, but it was always very calculated because I had to physically choose the colour myself. With the help of a multiply layer, you have a lot more freedom in choosing colours because you don't specifically have to pick a colour. So say I wanted to give this purple pinky undertones in the shading. So if I just take a grey pink colour here, set my layer to multiply and just draw, you can see it gives me a colour. It darkens your base colour using the colour that you're drawing with. So realistically this is like a very beigey pink, but when I multiply the purple layer underneath, you get this nice kind of blend between a pinky and a purple. And you know, it's really good for adding hints of colours when you're not quite sure how to do it yourself. Say I wanted to add a green on top of that for some terrible, terrible reason. Oh god, that looks terrible. Let's add blue instead. There we go, that's a bit better. You see how much easier it is when you don't have to physically look here and then maybe move the wheel around and drag this down and up and left and right. It especially helps with colouring things like this kind of yellowy gold colour, because it's very easy to work down here and get these very ugly, not to be rude, these very ugly muddy colours. So by adding, say, a red or an orange kind of dusty colour on multiply, you can get a much more natural goldy shading colour. Just like that, without having to mess around with your colour wheel. The next thing I'd like to mention is just a technique of how I colour, really. Say we're colouring this purple. I'm going to pick a bluey grey, and you would shade here, this kind of general vicinity, because you have two objects in front, obviously. So instead of going like this, use my natural, and then, you know, trying to blur it out and make it look smooth, and then going like this, and then coming across problems with like this point, I would have to change my brush size and go up here, or you know, whatever. I find it a lot easier to fill my whole shading layer in with the darker colour and then erase. Sorry about that. I think this is something I picked up when I used to colour all on one layer when I did like a more paintery style, and it is just a lot easier to rub away this big open space than to try and work around this fiddly little area here. So if I just go like that, I mean, what, that's like a couple seconds, and you already get the impression of a rounded ball object. And it's just, I just find it a whole lot easier. Really, I don't know what it is about it. Probably because you just have more open space in the lighter areas, more room to maneuver, instead of going around all fiddly on the edges. But, I mean, I'd say just give it a try, because for me, I find it a hell of a lot easier. And I mean a hell of a lot easier. So, after just one layer of shading, I usually do a couple more. I keep my layers separate, so that if I need to go back and change something, if I need to erase something or change the colour, I can do it without affecting the layers above or beneath. I know some people don't like this because your files can get big and messy, but for me, being able to go back and edit something easily is very important to me, because I tend to change my mind quite a bit. Next I just want to talk about the opposite of a multiply layer, which is an overlay layer. Now, see how this kind of bluey grey colour, when I set it to multiply, it darkens the base using that bluey grey colour. Overlay does the opposite, where it will lighten your base by using whatever colour you're drawing with. So say I wanted to add pinky highlights. I just choose a pink colour and airbrush on an overlay layer. It's a bit bright. It will highlight the layer for you using the colour that you're using. See that if I turn the opacity down a bit, it adds a very subtle pink highlight. You can do this with any colour, you can add yellows and stuff, and it's just an easier way, same with shading, it's an easier way of adding a highlight without having to manually colour pick, choose your highlight colour, and then highlight on your highlight colour. As you can see, a lot of these tips and trips revolve around being lazy. I'm not gonna lie. Next I just want to mention hair quickly, because I do that slightly differently. Same basic principle, I'm going to take a grey purpley kind of colour. The reason I use a lot of purples for my shading colours and a lot of warm colours up here for my highlights is because the majority of the time your shadows will be cooler and your highlights will be warmer. The general rule of thumb is if your highlight is warm, your shadows will be cool. If your highlight is cold, if you have a blue light or an icy light, your shadows will be warmer colours. There are tutorials on DeviantArt explaining this a lot better than I can, but personally I always prefer to shade with kind of bluey tones and highlight with golder tones. It especially helps create a unity when you're using a lot of colours, to always shade every item with a bluey colour, adds a bluey undertone. It's just something I do. But anyway, I'm gonna colour the hair in here. And hair, I use a different tool to my usual watercolour tool. I use the marker. Now, the marker handles a bit differently. My watercolour tool I have set to minimum size 100%. So basically, it comes out as a tube. So, marker comes out basically immediately looking like hair. It is a really great easy way to do hair without having to put too much effort into it, because you can literally just stroke and that looks pretty damn natural. That looks pretty damn good. The only thing I'd say is that it does not layer too well. You can see here where I've kind of drawn over it here and there and there. It gets a bit blotchy, so sometimes I will go over it with my watercolour tool. But these are the two tools I would definitely recommend, your marker and your watercolour. It's personal preference what tools you use the most. You know, just play around with the settings until you're happy. Just remember, you can turn any single brush into a rubber, or an eraser if you want to be American, by pressing this little checker icon underneath your colour swatches. And what this does is, get a bright colour so you can see. This airbrush, obviously airbrushes, when you press that button, it becomes a rubber. And this is really useful because, as I said with the way I colour here, sometimes rubbing away is easier colouring than, see, that's a nice ring of colour, than going in with an airbrush and trying to do that, you know, trying to do that manually. Do you see? Kind of see what I'm getting at here? Finally, I just want to mention something used to be really popular a couple of years back. I don't really see it so much anymore. Just something I do. The way I colour is very soft, and I like the kind of like soft glowing look. So sometimes to break up harsh colours that are next to each other, very different colours, I will add just a normal layer with an airbrush and just brush some of the underneath colour onto the thing you're shading. Turn down the opacity so you can barely see it, just a hint. And it just, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't affect the colour that much, because it's very subtle, but it just breaks up this boundary here and makes it look softer. As you can see on this picture, I've done it on the fringe, this bit here, just to make it, stop making it look so stark and jarring to see like very dark hair against pale skin. It just helps with that kind of glowy look that I go for in my colouring. Just personal taste of mine, really. And I think the last thing I want to mention really quickly is colouring your line art. This is something I didn't used to do because I didn't even think about it, but if you don't do it already, colouring your line art can really help pull together a piece and just make it look great. I know a lot of people do all their line art dark red and set it to multiply. Personally, I like having a bit more control and for once in my life actually picking a colour myself and drawing it on there. And the only thing I'd mention is that you might want to draw it on in a crazy colour first, which is something, if you've seen my speed paints, you may see me do a lot. And this just helps when drawing darker colours work out what the hell you're doing. So that's my outline for the purple. Preserve opacity, that means you don't go outside of the lines on the layer you're working on. Now pick a darker colour and just, actually that can be a bit lighter, and just colour. So yeah, that's just a few tips and tricks on how I colour and the various ways I achieve my colouring, since quite a lot of people seem to like it, which is nice. I just want to reiterate again, I'm not a professional, obviously. So, you know, don't take my words for gospel. I'm not even saying much, but whatever tips I have put, don't feel like you have to try them. These are just general tips. You can shade whatever way you want. If somebody's telling you you're doing it wrong, you know what, don't listen to them. Just do what you want and do what makes you happy. Art is expressing yourself, and in the end there are no rules to it. But here are a few tips that might help you out if you are looking to colour in a similar way that I do. Sorry if this video wasn't very helpful, but I don't feel qualified to make a full tutorial, I'm sorry. Thank you very much for watching, if any of you have stuck this far, and I hope I'll see you all soon. Well, not really, because I don't post vlogs or anything, but I hope to see you all again in my next speed paint. Thanks very much for watching, bye!